And now to Labour matters. The National Assembly is set to receive an executive bill on the new national minimum wage on Tuesday, following an agreement between President Bola Tinubu and Labour leaders for higher worker remuneration. This is according to the Special Advisor to the President Bola Tinubu on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, who confirmed that the lawmakers will receive the executive bill on the new minimum wage by Tuesday to ensure the agreement is legally binding and ready for implementation. And now to discuss this, we are joined by a Labour Law Expert Ireoluwa Oguntuase. Thank you so much, Mr. Oguntuase, for joining us on the news.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So we know that inflation is about 34.19%. Food inflation is 40.87%. If the minimum wage is 70,000 naira, what then is the living wage? And is that even a win for Nigerian workers and a dignified reward for their labor?
My brother, I don't think we should be talking of living wage, because we all understand the fact that when we talk of living wage, we're talking of the amount that should be paid for workers, to feed well, to be productive, the amount that workers need to collect so that they can be comfortable. And it should be difficult for any country to pay the living wage, especially a country like Nigeria, in which, we have galloping inflation. Inflation is at the high heavens now. All types of inflation, food inflation, there is, in fact, health inflation, there is tariff, electricity tariff now, and all the likes, food surge, prices of food are surged. So to that extent, if we look at all that, it is not possible for the government to pay the living wage. On the contrary, on the alternative rather, what the government should rather do is to ensure that all the parameters that have created an upsurge, in the prices of food, in the price of services, electricity, everything, should go down, at least to a very great extent, such that the citizens, the workers can afford it. I'd always known that it would be very difficult for minimum wage to assuage, the sufferings the workers are facing at the moment. And this is actually playing out. But beyond that, we've already known that living wage, government cannot pay living wage and the minimum wage cannot assuage. So beyond that, let's be looking at what the government should be looking at. What can they do in order to make life better for the Nigerians? And when I'm talking of the government, I'm not leaving it at the doorstep of the federal government alone. I'm also extending the tentacles of responsibility to even the subnational government as well, because they're also part of the federating unit. Okay. So all hands must be on deck to ensure that this hyperinflation, the rate of hyperinflation is stepped down. Else, the minimum wage would only do nothing but inflict more poverty on Nigerians.
All right, we'll still look at what needs to be done, but then let's do a bit of comparison. Ivory Coast's minimum wage is about $125, Togo, $85, Benin Republic, $86, Kenya, that is going through a rough patch now, $116, Morocco, $286, South Africa, $249, Seychelles, $464 minimum wage in these African countries. And when you do the comparison to 70,000 naira, that's just between $42, $43, $44. Now, we have rising inflation in the country. What is it that these other African countries are doing differently that is making it seem as though they're able to meet up with the minimum wage in their country, or in these countries that Nigeria seem not to be able to measure up to?
Very simple, without mincing words. They've prevented wastages to a very great extent, because I've looked at this country, the way this country is run, and we will know that there are a lot of wastages, there are a lot of corruption. We are not sincere with ourselves. The government will not come out to tell us the way things are. So if we compare these countries with our country, we will know that seemingly they seem to be running their government better. And at the same time, I've talked about leakages, I've talked about corruption. At the same time, we also seem not to be paying proper attention to this, the enforcement in the sense of it. And if I may give an example, we are just witnessing a case of our next governor, that is running from arraignment as a result of the charge that is being preferred against him. Nobody is being made an example. Nobody is being made an example. You know, the people that are supposed to be responsible on the face of it, they are not being responsible. So we cannot compare other countries with our own countries. I would rather say that we should focus on the challenges that we're facing as a country and try as much as possible to fix up that challenges before we can now start talking about measuring up with other countries. Apparently, there are things that these countries are doing better that we are not doing. And at the same time, you know, especially for the subnational government, there seems to be the apron strings of the federal government, because what they have been saying over time, even when the minimum wage was, when 60 or 62,000 is being negotiated for the minimum wage, is that they cannot meet up with it. Now, the minimum wage is 70,000. I know that what they want to do is to quickly run to the federal government and be seeking for, you know, soft loans, be seeking for things, you know, in that category, incentives in that category. But if we look at it, I believe that the subnational government can also stand on their own, can generate resources on their own, and should also be able to pay this minimum wage on their own, especially if we all reduce wastage in this country.
All right, but I understand that, but most of these states governments are still struggling to even pay 30,000 naira. Some are not even paying at all. But then let's look at it this way, because you actually said a lot needs to be done if we are going to be able to sustain this payment and increase the value of workers or Nigerians in the country. Now, a colleague of mine said increasing the minimum wage is not even the solution. Instead, the government should bring down the fuel cost, improve on security so that farmers can go back to the farm. You talked about electricity costs, that should also reduce. Otherwise, even private sectors and private businesses won't even be able to cope, because they are also complaining about the cost of production. Now, because we can keep talking about this, but the implementation is the problem. How do we go about implementing all these variables or all these probable solutions so that we will be able to solve the perennial problems and improve on the value of Nigerians and businesses alongside?
I think the most important thing at this level is, on one hand, for the government to recognize that we have these challenges, and on the other hand, for them to direct effort towards solving these challenges. Now, without that, I don't think any effort can be solved. And if we look at it, with all due respect, I don't think the government is serious enough in tackling all these issues that you've mentioned. Yes, I agree with you. You know, all these things are, all these issues and all these probable solutions that you've mentioned are things that the government needs to tackle. But if we also look at it, the issue of minimum wage is a creation of law. And the law has already provided for the period of time in which minimum wage should be reviewed. So a responsible government will know that it is not only minimum wage that can resolve or solve the problem. A responsible government will know that in addition to also fixing minimum wage, because even if you look at it, the minimum wage issue, you know, is an issue of best practice. There is an ILO convention, you know, fixing minimum wage convention, you know, which is actually Convention 131, 1970. So this convention has been in existence since 1970, and Nigeria is a member of ILO. So whether we like it or not, you know, the issue of minimum wage is an issue that has been domesticated, you know, into our laws as a result of this convention. So minimum wage is on one hand. The responsibility of the government to prevent, you know, high upsurge in goods and services is on the other hand. So government has a responsibility to do the two and not pay lip service, you know, to the welfare of the citizens, as it were. But for me, and in my humble opinion, has government been able to successfully do what will ensure that citizens has better welfare? For me, I don't think so. And this is the reason we find ourselves in this problem.
All right. Thank you so much, Ireoluwa Oguntuase, Labour Law Expert, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you.